All right, welcome everybody. Great to have you here. I see some questions in the field there coming in saying hello. So yeah, feel free to drop us a note and say hello. My name's Tom Graham, and I mainly focused on the Americas side of things, and I head up Dolby Vision Content Enablement. Along with me for this webinar are A.B. Matthew and Michael Hackle, who are our lead engineers for both the Americas and Europe, as well as our lead trainers in both of those areas. So grateful to have them along. And of course, Gavin Wang, who is the Dolby Vision product manager. So again, welcome. We have a full agenda, and in fair warning, I'm sure we will go over the hour. The good news is, though, we will record this, so you can listen to it, and if you can't stay the whole time, you can always check back in and watch the rest of it. And we also will provide a PDF towards the end that you can download of the deck we're sharing. So without further ado, let's get started. We have quite a few topics for you today, primarily focused on discussing the new XML format, which contains Dolby Vision cinema targets and trims specifically for home mastered content, and we'll dive into what all that means. We're also going to be discussing Dolby Vision IQ television support and a new metadata field that basically further enhances artistic intent delivery to the consumer through automatic playback optimization. We'll be talking about that. And then we're going to review two topics that seem to come up often in terms of questions we get. We probably have covered these topics before, but it's certainly worth revisiting them. It won't take long to do that section. And we decided it would be worthwhile to do a quick Dolby Vision overview of basically the iPhone Dolby Vision support, as well as the new Vimeo support. I know this is really a focused professional crowd of content creators, but we thought it would be useful to give you a quick overview of how that system works and how you might interact with it. And then finally, we'll finish up with a training and certification update, the latest news on the training program, the end of facility certification, and how the individual certification is going. And we'll try to answer your questions as we go along, so please type them into the chat, and we'll get going. So first kind of update I want to share with you is we're super excited to say that there are now over 7,600 pieces of content created in Dolby Vision and out in the ecosystem. And this is as of November, and it grows pretty much every month quite substantially. And we mainly want to say thank you for all of your support in helping create this amazing content. It's really, really growing, and we're super excited about the types of shows that we're seeing. Obviously, growth in all sorts of genres, including nonfiction, unscripted TV. One of my favorites is the glass blowing show Blown Away on Netflix. So shout out to the Toronto team that helped do that. But yeah, thank you again. We're very appreciative. All right, so diving into the new XML format, it's version 5.1.0, and it contains support for the idea of cinema targets as well as the existing home targets, and it has ways to identify both of them that we'll talk about and not interact between them. And then it also has a new metadata field called L11 that we'll dive into in terms of Dolby Vision IQ TV support. The catch with this is, like as with new things in the ecosystem, in order for the encoders to support this new XML format, they will need to update to the latest kit Software Development Kit 6.0. And as of this broadcast, most, if not all, of the encoders are not yet updated. So the near-term advice is, if you choose to use these new features, make sure to output or downgrade your XML to version 4.02, the current supported format. And as always, be sure to check with your studio partners. So I'm going to turn this one over to Gavin, if you're able to do this. But basically, one of the new features that are rolled into this release are the idea of new ECMU feature support. So Gavin, are you available to take this one?
Yeah. So we're releasing the ECMU software version 5.1.0. This one brings new features and kind of completes the Dolby Vision rollout for CM4. It brings in the CM4 real-time processing over SDI. We've added CM4 HDMI tunneling. And then we have a new SDI metadata interface. And now it no longer requires you to have a network connection with the source device. So you don't have to worry about making sure the color corrector or the mastering tool is talking with the CMU. And then we've done improvements to the web app. So in the web app, you'll be able to monitor the metadata coming in on a per frame basis. You'll be able to do controls on that. So the one thing about the ECMU software is it does require, because we've updated the SDI metadata interface, it requires the partner tools to update to the latest Dolby Vision SDK. So they must be on the Dolby Vision content mapping SIDK version 5.1 or higher. And this ECMU is not backwards compatible with tools that have not been updated, that are using the existing, the previous kits. So what we're doing is supporting two versions of ECMU. So when you look at the box folder where you get the professional tools and the ECMU software updates, there'll be two versions of ECMU software. One will be the current version, the previous version, which is 3.0.4, and the other one will be 5.1.0. So currently, only Rio has released their product to support the ECMU 5.1.0 release. So if you're on the latest build of Rio, then you can go into that box folder and download the new ECMU software and use that. Other partner tools will be rolling out updated releases throughout next year.
That's great. So I'm going to launch a poll here quickly. If you don't mind voting, we'd love to hear from you. So essentially, this is a question about the idea of the new eCMU. And Gavin, basically version 4.0 of CM, content mapping 4.0, one of the new features that they might get with this eCMU support is tunneling in Dolby Vision 4.0 to a Dolby Vision 4.0 TV, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And just to also, we did have a question that some people were curious. Does this mean CM is changing from 4.0 to 5.1?
No, we have many versions for different things. So this is all to support CM with our core algorithm, which is CM4. The 5.1.0 is a version number for the software release of itself. We did that to align with the SIDK version numbers. Mm-hmm. So that's more for our version tracking. So okay. For CM, we still only have two versions that you need to be aware of. One is CM 2.9, and then the other one is CM 4.
Okay, great. So again, content mapping version 2.9 is the original Dolby Vision mapping algorithm, and then CM 4.0 is the more modern, and this doesn't change that. Great. Okay, so I'm going to close the poll and I'll share the results so everyone can quickly see. So thank you for voting. Looks like some folks are looking forward to some of these new 4.0 features in eCMU. That's great. Okay, so we'll now move on here, and again, check with your color grading system manufacturer on their time frame to support this new eCMU functionality. All right, so in our next section, we're going to talk about Dolby Vision cinema targets and trim controls for home masters. So essentially, streaming home content oftentimes needs cinema versions. So in the case of a hit TV show, they may want to do a red carpet premiere. Sometimes content creators need film festivals or short theatrical runs, cast and crew screenings. We've also seen situations where a primary show has a home restoration version, say for UHD Blu-ray and or streaming, and they would like to re-release for a short theatrical run, be it 48 nit traditional cinema or the 108 nit Dolby cinema. So there's quite a bit of reasons why home focused content may want theatrical versions, and oftentimes they may use LUT workflows or other types of things to get that result quickly. And so what we've done is, as Gavin sort of talked about, is we've released this new SIDK to our partners, and it includes basically display targets and trim controls for several versions of the 48 nit standard cinema, which would be including different white points. So D60 white point, D65, or DCI white point. And again, those are all standard dynamic range gamma 2.6 targets. And then we have also included a target for the Dolby Cinema projectors, which is our laser projector that I believe there's about 260 Dolby Cinemas worldwide now, with the premium large format laser projector. And so that is in HDR, 108 nit P3 D65 PQ. The headline here is that the cinema targets are completely independent from the home targets and that they do not interact. And they are labeled as such, so we'll be taking you through what that means. And again, these are only supported in the new XML 5.1.0. And really some great news is that both Baselight and Rio are now shipping with this functionality built in. So how does it work? Well, it's everything that you have currently done or are doing on your home mastered content. So obviously you have to have a properly cut up timeline. You have to work in P3 or Rec 2020. You're working in PQ. You choose Dolby Vision 4.0. You're using an iCMU, either single monitor or dual monitor. In our example, we'll be using a 1000 nit P3 D65 mastering monitor, and we're setting up our active image area output blanking level 5 to say 239. From there, everything is as, again, normal. You basically create your 1000 nit HDR master grade. You run the Dolby Vision shot by shot analysis, and it creates level 1 metadata. You are then going to select your 100 nit, and again, whether you choose to do the home or the cinema trim first is entirely up to you. They do not interact. So based on your timeline and your need, you can choose either. But in this case, we're going to go with the traditional, we're going to do the home version first. And you'll notice that in the Baselight target that we're selecting, there is an indicator for home targets and cinema targets separately. So they are flagged separately. And we're going to choose Rec 709 100 nit gamma as our SDR 100 nit target. And you basically look at that, you check the metadata, and if you decide you want to make any trim control adjustments, for the 100 nit trim pass, you go ahead and do that. And we are calling this now the home anchor trim, really the bottom that defines the mapping for the home televisions. And although trims are not required to deliver a Dolby Vision Master, for most services, they are expecting to see a 100 nit anchor trim. Of course, there are secondary 6-vector color correction controls as well that you can apply. And you could then optionally switch your target to a 600 nit PQ mapping to see how your content is now mapping between 1000 and 100 nits at 600. And these values are interpolated. So you would switch your target to 600 and maybe make any slight adjustments or trim controls at the 600 nit layer. This essentially concludes your home 1000 nit HDR Dolby Vision master, and you could export your mezzanine at this point. But for our example, we're going to go ahead now and switch our target to a 48 nit DCI white point projector, and we're going to connect it to a standard dynamic range traditional projector. And this then takes the content and maps it down to 48 nits. In our testing, we felt that a 1-hour TV show did need some trimming. You are going from basically 1,000,000 to 1 contrast ratio down to somewhere around 1,700 to 1 based on the quality of your bulb and your projector. And so it is a fairly long way to go, but we were able to trim a 1-hour TV show in about 2 hours. And some of that work can be done, shot-based or scene-based, etc. Really, it is very doable, and it looks good. Again, we're calling this the cinema anchor trim. This is really the bottom defining that cinema area. So if you do have a Dolby Vision laser projector, or you have a need to do that, you can then switch over to the Dolby Cinema target, and these values will be interpolated from that 48 nit trim. And in our experiments and testing thus far, it looks really, really good, and we didn't see the need to trim the 108 nit target. It mapped very nicely based on those anchor trims. But assuming you do want to trim it, again, you would change your target and your trims to that Dolby. You can see up here in the top right, we've set it to 108 nit P3 D65. And again, these trim controls would be interpolated from the 48 nit anchor trim. And essentially, you've now created both home and cinema targets in the same XML, and you could export your finished full. Again, this is sort of, I think, leaning forward into the future where all of the encoders are updated, etc. We talked about sort of downgrading that XML to a 402 if you're just delivering home content, but perhaps you want to export an XML that has both cinema and home targets together, and then you can downgrade that to deliver your mezzanine to someone like Netflix or HBO Max, etc. In terms of the actual cinema output, you do need to render those files out because there is no mapping that occurs in a cinema. It's not going to read the metadata. So you literally would render out your TIFF sequence at 108 nit PQ or SDR gamma P3 48 nit, and then from there you would create your DCPs for your screenings. Also want to give a shout out to the Grass Valley team. This is Rio, and you can see in terms of targets, they have added the full Cinema Home kit and are updated as well. So we're really excited to have, as I said, Baselight and Rio supporting this. So I'm going to launch a poll here and just say, how would you describe your interest in the cinema trims for home content? And let's take some questions. AB, Michael, you guys want to take a few questions on air? I'm not able to see them all, so I'm kind of leaning on you guys to pick the ones we should answer.
I think there was a question about should we start with the 1000 nit master grade? I think you mentioned that, but I think people are still not sure about how that works. Yeah, I mean, the starting point of the cinema trims is an HDR master grade at 1000 nits or 2000 or whatever.
Yeah, so I guess everything's the same as if you were delivering a home master. And I think the definition of this is you also might need some cinema deliverables or cinema versions. So I think the confusion maybe if you have, say, a feature film that's destined for theaters and such, is this the perfect solution for you? It may not be. And so this is an enhancement to the home master workflow that is just another tool in your toolbox, essentially. Any other questions, AB, we should grab?
Yeah, do you still need to license the 108 nit laser projection with Dolby to be able to create a Dolby Vision master? I guess what that means is you need a Dolby Vision laser or a Dolby Cinema laser projector in order to create a Dolby Cinema master. I guess that's what they're asking.
I think that's a great question. The answer to that is somewhat gray. And obviously we advise always trimming on if you're doing a DCI 48 nit target, we would highly advise you trim it on that device. If you're doing a Dolby Cinema pass, we highly recommend you do it on a Dolby Vision laser projector. If that's not an option, perhaps you could render out the 108 nit interpolated target and then rent out a Dolby Cinema near you and screen your output on a Dolby laser projector, and then make any notes and go back and maybe perhaps change them while looking at, say, a monitor. But generally speaking, always a good idea to do it on the device you're trimming to. Any more, AB?
No, I think you're good to go. We'll bring it up. Michael, anything?
So there were questions if one would need to do an SDR 100 nit trim first in order to get a 48 nit trimmed version. So no, you don't have to. So you can see this here in the screenshot of Rio that these different targets are now separated by the words here in brackets, so home and cinema. So both these application types, they are independent from each other. So you would just do your grade as normal, run the analysis, and then you would, for a home delivery, map down to 100 nit, do the trims if needed. And if you want to go for a cinema delivery, then just change the mapping to, let's say, 48 nit, and then start a trim version from there. But the 100 nit one, which is for home, will not affect the cinema version.
Great. Awesome. And this kind of brings us to our FAQ. When you download the PDF at the end, or you can use your camera now, you're able to use the QR code, and this will take you to the knowledge base articles. And so quickly, do I need an additional license or additional software to unlock the mapping and trimming for cinema? And the answer is no, that's included in your normal Dolby Vision license. And can I deliver a finished home mezzanine with the cinema trims included? I think the answer to that is in the future, yes. But for now, you should plan on downgrading your XMLs to deliver to your content partners. And this one we covered extensively. Do the new cinema trims affect the home trims? And the answer is no, neither will affect each other. Again, check with your studio partner on their needs and or your plans to perhaps use this technology. I guess the question then becomes, how can I separate my home and cinema targets into individual Dolby Vision XML versions? So obviously version 4.02 is the current one that most studios and streaming partners expect. So you can use Metafire to downgrade your 510 XML and split it into two. And I believe, Gavin, Baselight and probably Rio have abilities just to export the 4.02 XML, even though you've been working with these new formats. Is that correct?
Yeah, when we in the kits we explain how to downgrade XMLs. So all the color correctors will generate a 4.0.2 XML by default, unless you use one of the new features. Then if you add a cinema trim or L11 metadata, it will export a 510 XML, and then you have the option to override that to export a 402 XML, and it'll remove the non-supported features in that. So it'll remove the cinema trims and it'll remove the L11 metadata for you.
And there was a question from Ian saying, do we have to do a 48 nit trim if we want to go directly to 108? And the answer is no, you don't. If you don't have a need for the 48 nit trim or the 48 nit version, you could just go directly to the 108 nit as well. So great question. If you'd like further information on the cinema targets, and again, we'll try to get some more questions at the end as well, but there is a link for the knowledge base article. So there's an FAQ and a knowledge base article on this new functionality. All right, into our next section, explaining Dolby Vision IQ and the new L11 metadata. So it too is a new feature in this new XML format. So let's dig in. So Dolby Vision IQ TV started hitting the market in 2020, and they won Best Home Theater Product by Engadget magazine at CES 2020. And it's currently supported in 2020 and 2021 TV models from LG, Panasonic, TCL, Hisense, and 3 other OEMs. So basically there's 2 components to the Dolby Vision IQ support, and both are aimed at really enhancing or better delivering artistic intent to the consumer in the out of the box. You just purchased this TV, you open it up, and you're looking at a Dolby Vision content in the default mode. So the user doesn't need to dig through menus, make adjustments. And we found that basically 75% of the users who get these TVs really don't adjust the picture mode from the default setting. And so in comparison, Dolby Vision IQ or out of the box default mode, what you might know today as Cinema Home on LG TVs or Cinema Bright mode on the TCL. And both of those modes are essentially designed to be viewed in a living room with windows, and different types of lighting. Obviously, Cinema mode on the LG or Cinema Dark mode on the, I think it's on the TCL, might be called Reference Dark mode on the TCL. Those are considered reference mode for dark rooms, and this feature does not affect those. Those would be the traditional reference mode viewing, but the consumer would have to put it into those modes. All right, so the first component of Dolby Vision IQ is LightSense, which is designed to compensate the tone mapping based on the brightness of the room. And you can see in the video as the room gets brighter, the Dolby Vision IQ Light Sense feature compensates the tone mapping upwards, which would be extremely useful watching very dark content, say in a daylight setting or with lights on. Just to be clear, Light Sense is really a device side implementation only. There's really nothing you need to do on the content creation side. The second feature to talk about is automatic playback optimization, or APO for short. It's controlled by this new metadata field called L11. So like the UHDA filmmaker mode, its primary function is to stop the soap opera picture processing for movie content. Again, once the version 6 encoder kits have been fully implemented in the market, this cinema mode or reference mode behavior will be the default setting for any 24 or 25 frame content. Filmmaker mode is really cool, but it does require the user to opt in. So basically, Dolby Vision IQ will turn off soap opera effect and other undesired post-processing in the default IQ mode without the user having to do anything. So diving into it a little bit deeper, into the details a little bit deeper, the kit that is now going into color correctors and mastering tools has added an L11 flag or field to tag your content. And as I said, Baselight and Rio have now been updated, but please contact your specific color grading vendor for their timing to support L11. Essentially, if you do nothing and your content is 24 frame and 25 frame, the future encoders will automatically see and turn it into movie mode, which, as you can see, setting number 1, movie mode, is very similar to what filmmaker mode does. It turns off frame rate conversion, noise reduction, and sharpness enhancement. If, however, you're working on, say, post-producing sports content, so you're working on a piece, that's going to be a post-produced version that goes maybe on the Olympics or a football game or something like that, and you do want to support that, you have the option to then flag your content, say, as number L11 content setting number 3, which supports a certain amount of frame rate conversion, noise reduction, and sharpness. So again, here's the QR code. If you'd like to read a bit more about this, I would say in summary that as with the rollout of an adoption of CM 4.0 into the ecosystem, which has grown over the last 2.5 years, it will take some time for this feature to be incorporated into the mastering tools, color grading systems, and ultimately the encoders. But for now, we're excited about this new Dolby Vision feature for better delivering artistic intent. And we ask you to talk with and work with your studio mastering team again before moving to XML 5.1.0 and L11 support. And for now, if you're working on 24 or 25 frame content, you don't have to do anything. The encoders would take care of it for you. So I'll pause there, AB and Michael, to see if we have any quick. Oh, we have a couple comments. Yay for that, and thanks. Sounds good. And it doesn't seem like there's any questions focused on this new feature, so we'll move on then.
There seems to be some confusion about L11 and cinema trims, so we're trying to answer that, saying they are different. Yeah, I think since we've spoken about both of them, people seem to be thinking they're the same, or they're connected, or yeah.
Yeah, they are. That's a good point, AB. Thank you. There are two enhancements to functionality going forward in the Dolby Vision content creation ecosystem. They are completely different though, but they are supported together in XML 5.1.0. So, all right, AB, I'm going to turn it over to you. Or is this Michael? Sorry.
Oh, yeah, it's Michael.
Sorry about that. Michael.
Oh, okay. So what do we have here? This is the ProRes section. A question basically we get here and then is how to deliver a Dolby Vision Master as a QuickTime ProRes. So basically in full range or in legal range. And so let's have a look what we mean by full range or legal range. Some refer to it as computer and video or full and head. So you already see that there are multiple names basically describing the same. And so the ranges I just mentioned, they define which code values are used to encode the signal information. So for instance, a full range 10-bit file uses values from 0 to 1023, where 0 is representing full black and 1023 is full white. So in legal range, a 10-bit file uses a code value range from 64 to 940, where 64 is full black and 940 is full white. And so it is very important to understand that there are codecs that expect either full range encoded data, whereas others, they expect legal range encoded data. And Tom, if we get to the next one, we see here a good example for a codec that usually expects legal range data, and this is ProRes. And Baselight serves as a very good example here, as for instance, when you're rendering to a ProRes, Baselight automatically applies a full to legal scaling. Resolve does basically the same when rendering to a ProRes, and it sets the data levels automatically to video or to auto when you're exporting a ProRes file. And again, Baselight on the next slide brings up a warning when you are rendering to a ProRes file other than in legal range. You see here on the bottom, you see this this warning, and you should change it then back to scaling. So now we know how certain software may handle ProRes on export. We must take into account that some software applications, they may work in legal range internally, while others work in full range by default. However, most modern post-production software will work in full range by default, and they will then scale the imported video range files to full range automatically. And so speaking for both of our examples here, so Baselight and Resolve, this is true. And on the left-hand side, you can see a screenshot from Baselight's so-called color space journey. And they outline here the processing that happens on the input. And you can see that the imported ProRes file gets scaled back from legal to full. And the same is happening in Resolve. It's not that obvious here because Resolve, they don't offer such a view. However, there's also this legal to full conversion on import, and you can easily check this. Just navigate to the clip attributes in your media page and then switch between the data level modes, and you will see that scaling is happening here as well. So as you might have experienced, handling ProRes files might be tricky, and other applications, they might treat ProRes differently. So we really recommend that you're testing your workflow upfront, your delivery, and that you check with your studio partner how they would expect the ProRes to be delivered. And I think we also have a QR code here for some further reading on ProRes as well as legal range workflows in our knowledge base.
Yeah, we do, and I highly recommend checking this because there has been some confusion. We have heard it from several different partners. So the headline here, Michael, am I saying in terms of how Resolve handles, you should not override the auto setting, correct?
Yes, correct.
Great. Awesome. AB, any other questions that you see we should handle in terms of this before I close this poll?
No, and I think just to drop a point in there, I think there was a time maybe 3-4 years ago in our documentation where we used to specify that when you create your ProRes deliverables from Resolve, you need to set full. And I think that caused some confusion. And that's why we went back and corrected it. We said, no, you have to set it to auto. And all our documentation now says you have to use auto. So just, yeah, I think people do maybe remember that and make that mistake. So.
Great. Okay, we'll take some more questions at the end, but AB, take us through a reminder on how to deal with color encoding changes.
All right. Yep. So we keep getting this question, and that's the reason we thought we should talk about it. When you work in a certain format, when you work in, let's say, P3, and then you have to make a deliverable in Rec 2020, there are a few things you have to do. But then, and we have brought this up previously in past webinars, but every now and then we get a question and we think, there may still be some confusion around it. And that's the reason we thought we should reiterate that here. So when you make deliverables, especially in different color spaces and formats, you have to change two primary parameters, or you have to pay attention to these two parameters. The first one is the mastering monitor, and I will show you where exactly that is in the XML and how to read that and so on in a minute. But the mastering monitor setting or the selection is done at the time of the analysis. So just before you run the analysis, there's a checklist of things you have to do, and one of them is to select your mastering display. And we generally say, be honest about whatever monitor you're using, the way the monitor is set up. So if you're using a P3 monitor that's capable of 1000 nits, you would go into the selector and select a 1000 nit P3 mastering monitor. Now, once that is selected and then you run your analysis and do your trims and so on, you never change it. That's never meant to be changed because that's how you did the whole Dolby Vision process. And so even if you have to make different deliverables for different studios and so on, the mastering monitor always remains as it was when you first selected it, right? So that is very important to remember. Now, the second parameter that's important is the color encoding. Now, the color encoding is a description inside the XML. It describes the image component that goes with the Dolby Vision Master. So a Dolby Vision Master is delivered as an image component and a metadata component, right? And the image component is usually rendered as P3 or rendered as Rec 2020. Now, whichever format you decide to render, that needs to be specified in the color encoding, right? And we have a knowledge base article on that because, like I said, it's a question that keeps coming up. So if you go to the next slide, Tom, again, if you're working in P3 and delivering P3, or if you're working in Rec 2020 and delivering Rec 2020, you don't have any problems here because the system takes care of it. The issue is when you have to make a deliverable that's not in the color space that you were working in. And this happens to a lot of people because a lot of facilities prefer to work in P3, but then they have to make a Rec 2020 deliverable. That is when this sort of confusion comes up. Now, the way to check that, if you look at the XML on the left, what you're seeing on the left side is simply a text editor showing you an XML. And right on top, somewhere at the beginning of the XML, you will see a section that is marked color encoding. And color encoding, right on the top there, you will see a section that says color primaries. And that is what is the important part. So when you make different versions, you have to make sure that those color primaries match the render. So if you rendered P3, you will have to make sure that your color primaries show P3 color primaries. If you are rendering Rec 2020 as your deliverable, then the color primaries in the color encoding must show Rec 2020 color primaries. So just below that, you will see there's another section that shows mastering display. And we spoke about this earlier. When we go and select your mastering display before you run the analysis, that selection is stored in this section of the XML. So you see there are color primaries there too, but then those color primaries refer to the mastering monitor that you selected. And on the right is the Medifier validation report, which shows you the same thing. So the validation report shows you the mastering display as well as the color encoding. So whenever you deliver two separate versions, and I get calls from people saying I have to deliver both versions. I have to make a P3 package and a Rec 2020 package. Then if we go to the next slide, Tom, you can see the two sort of versions of the XMLs that we have to deal with. So the one on the left is the XML that you would use if you had to make a P3 delivery. You see that the color primaries are different from the ones that you have on the right. The one on the right is a Rec 2020 XML, so which means this XML on the right can be delivered with a Rec 2020 package. Now, if you go down to the bottom of that, you see the mastering display is still the same because it still retains the original selection that I made. The fact that you're making two separate versions of that does not change the mastering display. And that is something that, keeps coming up. People tend to get confused about that. And that's why we thought it was important to bring that up. I don't know if we have the QR code for the article. Yeah, so again, this was the point I was trying to make, is that the color encoding needs to be changed when you have that difference in the delivery format. But remember, do not change the mastering display. That remains exactly the same as it was when you created it. And this is the QR code for the article on that. So it has a sort of a detailed explanation of why and how it's supposed to work.
That's great, AB. I thank you for running through that again. It's worth sort of revisiting. And we're just going to launch a quick poll here before we get into the next section. Doesn't look like we have any specific questions. Currently about the mastering monitor. I think we got some good results there. So, all right. Thank you everyone for voting on these. It just helps us make sure that we know we're reaching the right group of people.
Tom, yeah, sorry, there's a very good question that just came up that I think I missed talking about. A very common thing that people get confused about is when you work in Rec 2020 and limit your working output color space to P3. Now, remember, when you limit your working output, your output color space to P3, the output color space is still Rec 2020. The fact that you're limiting it to P3 inside the color corrector does not change the output. As far as the monitor or any device getting it, or even when you make a render, when you render the images are inherently Rec 2020 images. The fact that it is limited to P3 does not change the way that image is being read, right? So just keep that in mind. Everything about that image is Rec 2020. So for example, if I were to set up my color corrector to output Rec 2020, I would go to my color management and set a limiter to P3. But remember, what's going out of the system and what the monitor is receiving is still Rec 2020. So it's very, very important in that case, when I render out the Rec 2020 images, the color encoding primaries will still say Rec 2020, even though you have limited your output to P3, right? A lot of people seem to think that since I've limited the output to P3, my color primaries should be P3. That's not the way the system works. All right?
Great.
Yeah. Thanks for that question.
Okay, so we'll come back to, if we have more questions at the end, we can come back to the color grading and coding. So Michael, over to you to take us through Dolby Vision, iPhone and Vimeo content creation.
Sure. So when we're talking about Dolby Vision on services like Vimeo, so there's an app service in China, it's Bilibili. Then we also have to mention the iPhone 12 and 13 capabilities of recording natively in Dolby Vision. So when doing so, the iPhone will record an HEVC encoded file, which is also referred as a profile 8.4. In this profile, this uses the hybrid log gamma transfer function. along with frame-by-frame Dolby Vision dynamic metadata that gets calculated while the content gets captured. And once you captured this content, you can instantly share this via Vimeo so that other users, they can then review your captured content in Dolby Vision on qualified Apple devices, as well as the latest Dolby Vision TVs. But for sure, you can also edit your Dolby Vision captured source footage directly in tools like LumaFusion on iPad or iPhone, as well as Apple Final Cut Pro. And so both these editing applications, they also support the export of your edited Dolby Vision content in this Profile 8.4. So in this case, the Dolby Vision metadata gets recreated during the export process, and it will take any editing or color adjustments made into account. So we see the screenshots from LumaFusion and Final Cut, and these tools, they will then calculate this frame-by-frame metadata, very similar to the long play analysis that you might be familiar with once you're exporting your content. However, this Dolby Vision on Vimeo isn't limited to content that got captured in Dolby Vision. So basically, you can use any source footage as well as your preferred editing and color grading tool, and then export a hybrid log gamma encoded file to Apple Compressor. And Compressor will then create the Dolby Vision 8.4 encoded video, and again, will calculate the Dolby Vision frame-by-frame metadata during the encoding process. And then you will just upload this Profile 8.4 again to Vimeo. And then once the content got uploaded to Vimeo, it will get further processed for streaming purposes. So Vimeo, they will create Dolby Vision versions, they will create HDR10 versions, and they will also create SDR versions. Whereas this SDR gets derived directly from this hybrid log gamma base layer and is not derived by Dolby Vision metadata. And so if you have already created a finished Dolby Vision master, you can also publish this finished PQ HDR grade on Dolby in Dolby Vision on Vimeo. So you have to convert your PQ master to hybrid log gamma, and then again run it through Apple Compressor in order to create Dolby Vision 8.4 metadata, and then upload it to Vimeo, where they will create then the Dolby Vision HDR10 and the SDR versions. So you can see there are some differences in the workflow, as well as the technical specs when creating content in Dolby Vision for Vimeo and OTT service providers. So for these Profile 8.4 or Vimeo workflows, however we call them, the transfer function is hybrid log gamma, whereas we are using ST2084, so PQ, when we create Dolby Vision content for OTT. And the metadata generation is performed on a frame-by-frame basis, so like, again, long play analysis, and this happens during the encoding process. Different to the PQ-based workflows, where we usually create shot-by-shot metadata that can also be trimmed and previewed using the content mapping process, which is not available for the Vimeo workflows. And on Vimeo, the SDR version gets derived straight from the hybrid log gamma, where OTT services, they all use the Dolby Vision metadata to create the SDR streaming version. So that's it for Dolby Vision on Vimeo. Yes, here again, the QR code. So we have a lot of content on these workflows. So we have video tutorials, FAQs. We have articles that will explicitly outline, again, the differences that we briefly covered here. So just scan the QR code and you'll find lots of additional information on the knowledge base.
Cool. And then we just thought we'd take a poll to see over the last year, the content that you've worked on, how much of it is in 4.0 versus how much of it is in CM 2.9. Just helpful to kind of get a gauge of where we are in the transformation to that Dolby Vision 4.0, better set of tools and delivery to the consumer, etc. So appreciate the votes there. Looks like we have a question on does Vimeo use the colorist created L1, L8, making its encode? And the answer to that, Michael, is no. Correct? It's a frame by frame L1 automatic version at this time.
Yes, this is correct. So they are just using the L1 metadata that is created during the export, either using compressor or directly exported from, let's say, an iPhone or Final Cut Pro or LumaFusion.
Cool. All right, so here's our results. Looks like the majority of people are doing 4.0 content. So thank you for sharing that with us. It's greatly appreciated. We'll now continue back with our webinar here, and all of these QR codes that you've seen so far lead you to articles on the Dolby Professional Support Help Center. So that, I think, is a theme that connects everything we've done today on this webinar. So there's FAQs, there's knowledge-based articles, there's even a whole section on this Dolby Vision for Vimeo support. So again, here's the QR code to lead you to that, or you can just go to professionalsupport.dolby.com. And it's a great resource. Michael and the team really spend a lot of time trying to answer these questions. And there's also a section on supporting learning in terms of self-guided online training. So basically the course that AB and Michael have designed and teach is available in terms of a self-guided online go at your own pace course. And there's also obviously one on Dolby Atmos for post-production and music production as well. We also, over this last year, with the pandemic, we no longer offered in-person facility certification. So we transitioned over a year ago now to individual training and certification. And so that is available to purchase on prostore.dolby.com. You can purchase both training and individual certification, or you can just purchase training. So for instance, here is the upcoming Americas training. We have one in January, one in February, and one in March. And essentially it's 3 days. It basically goes from 10 a.m. till roughly 12:30 or 1 p.m. each day. And it's again available for $400. We typically, I believe, do it in GoToWebinar like this, and there's a maximum of 15 people in the room, and you're able to interact and ask questions. Secondarily, we also offer this training in Spanish with our newest instructor, Jose Luis Tamez, who's an absolute fantastic resource. So we offer those again once a month, focused on Latin America time frame, but oftentimes people from Spain can and will join. And we also offer an APAC time zone version as well. And if you're interested in purchasing the certification, that's an additional $200 if you buy it at the time of purchase, or $250 if you choose to purchase it separately. And essentially, it's a single application to take the test, both the online multiple choice test, as well as download an HDR graded file for the practical test, where you essentially create the Dolby Vision metadata and deliver back an IMF package. So both of these are available now, and the training typically runs once a month. If you have a group of people who'd like to go through the training, contact us and we can get you a discount code for multiple people. And we currently have over 400 individuals certified, and we, as part of the certification process, we publish that list of people, and it could be colorists, engineers, post-producers, and we will list your associated facility. You can link to your website and an IMDb page as well. So, and you can see in this instance, I searched for people from Los Angeles. Program is, still about a year in, but we've had a great response and great feedback from people who say it's been very, very helpful for them. And so we've reached our Q&A time, and we really appreciate you guys joining us. I'm going to launch another poll here as we answer the Q&A, and we'd love to hear from you how useful this webinar was for you as we take some more questions. So AB, pick one and lead us off.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of questions about training. One of them is that I'm already certified, but is there a way to get a refresher course, from a training perspective? So
yeah, contact us. We can, if you've paid for the training or certification before, let us know. We can try to have you audit one of the classes to join back in. So that should be fine, as long as you've paid for the course before and taken it. That should be easy to do.
Yeah, and I suppose if you were a certified facility and you'd like a refresher, we can probably organize that as well. You probably don't need to go through the entire thing. We can probably do a 1 day or something.
Cool. Looks like AB
yeah, I think there's a question about the P3 2020.
Yeah, sure. Do you want to grab that one?
Sure. So the question is going back again to grading in P3 and output 2020. Can I simply use the tone mapping option on my render and select Rec 2020? We don't really recommend that because essentially you're trying to get, let's say you've done your master in P3, so which means it's probably at 1,000 nits or 2,000 nits or whatever. We would recommend creating a separate master at Rec 2020. So it's, it could be as simple as maybe rendering out the P3, bringing it back in and converting that to Rec 2020, or you could just change your color pipeline setting so that the output is Rec 2020. So you get two distinct masters in P3 and Rec 2020, and then you create two XMLs to go with them. I think that is the more recommended. Using the mapping to create that Rec 2020, probably not the best way to do it.
Cool. And Brandon, if you can, is it possible to upload the PDF of the deck for people to download here? Is that possible?
Yes, it's uploaded already.
Okay, great. Sorry, I don't see it. My bad. But there's a place in the dashboard that they can select it and download it?
It is. It's available on the handouts. So most likely once we get off of this webinar, then we'll update.
Okay, great. Any more questions about the L11 or the new cinema trims, AB or Michael?
Yeah, I think there are still a few questions, Michael, about the Vimeo. But I think I think someone's answering those.
Yeah, so there were some questions if Vimeo basically respects any trims or the metadata that you have created inside your color corrector. No, they don't. So currently it's that they only accept this profile 8.4, and this profile consists of automatically frame by frame created metadata that is created on export. Yeah, so it's an automatic process, so to say.
Seems like we're getting a couple questions about certification. I'll take a shot at generally. I mean, the purpose for certification is really to help, assuming you're going to create a title for one of the studios, et cetera, it's really to help test your knowledge that you understand, in fact, a lot of these key challenging situations, whether it's delivering, a Rec 2020 or P3 in a Rec 2020, those types of things. And then to make sure that you are able to essentially create the proper metadata and IMF package it. And ultimately, the things that we test in that area are simply that your content wouldn't get rejected by one of the studios. So, there's a couple people, do I have to do it? How essential is the test to create the IMF? And, the test is fairly stringent in that, there's, I think is it 20 multiple choice questions, and then creating the IMF package, and you basically get 2 chances at each one.
Correct.
Before you have to take it again. So
yeah, I think there was a question about the IMF saying how important is that, and the reason we do that is because a few prominent studios request for the IMF as their standard delivery for Dolby Vision, and second, I think it's becoming more and more popular. So we believe, as a certified Dolby Vision user, you should be able to create an IMF, at least know how that works. And that's the reason we've included that. So we recognize that if you're a colorist and if you work in a big facility, you probably are not the one doing that IMF packaging process. So but then we thought it needs to be comprehensive, right? It needs to cover the entire spectrum of things that you need to know when doing the Dolby Vision training. So yeah.
Right. Awesome. Well, I think that pretty much covers it. If you have further questions, please reach out to us. We're always available, everyone on this webinar. And I do see the handout is now available to download. I see the PDF. So this is a deck. We appreciate if you wouldn't, reuse it elsewhere, but it's for your information in terms of the QR codes and getting to the articles and et cetera. So thank you all, and I hope you have a safe and happy holiday from all of us here at Team Dolby. We very much appreciate your support and wish you success in the new year. So thank you very much.
Thank you.